Okay, we begin again. I'm Dr. Rose, and we have talked about pop art. So we begin again with a discussion of pop art, and we're starting with the same slide that we began with in the last video. So in your PowerPoint, I would like for you to refer to the slide entitled In the Car. So let's talk about In the Car with a little bit more detail. So I ended last time by talking about the man. So the man is here. We'll go over the hair again. Now notice that these pieces have lines that are visible. So we have been looking previously at artwork that the lines were not so visible, but here we can see that they are very visible. So that's a distinct difference. And we also see perspective, but it's very close perspective. But it gives us the image and the clearness that the two individuals are sitting next to each other side by side. So we don't want to take that for granted because that's well done. And that is done because a portion of her face and body covers his, which is a simple technique. Notice that there are other lines near him. And this helps to give it the cartoonish effect. But these are very neat because the title of the piece lets us know they're in the car, but there's some other little subtleties that help us to understand. First of all, the lines help us to understand that we are looking at glass, these diagonal lines. Secondly, he's holding on to just this contour. This little contour right here is letting us know that it's a steering wheel for the car. So that's very well done. Now, let's take a look at her. So getting to her hair, previously I was discussing her hair and the fact that it is yellow. And so this is to create what is known as blonde hair. Blonde hair we find mostly on white and or European women. So that was done. She has lots of contour to give her hair a sense of modern style that is reminiscent of the period. So we get period style because we would not see someone in the 1800s or the 1700s or anything to that effect dressed in this way. So her style is popular. Note her collar on her top. It appears to be a jacket or a coat, and it has a little bit of a leopard print. So it's very, very reminiscent of the time period. We can even see a little earring peeking out from the side of her hair. Also note the eyebrows, the eyelashes, the detail that is done very, very nicely, done with very, very simple lines. And her face has tremendous contour. And we can see a little bit of his ear if you look very carefully there. So we don't want to think for one moment that because this art is popular and that it's cartoonish, that it's not well done, because it is very well done. So here we can also see a very clear definition of the nose, and her lipstick is very pink, very vogue at the time. Now, these lines are used to create more insight into the fact that they're in a car. So we don't have any doubt whatsoever as to how they are seated. The contrast, how is contrast created? First, with her skin and his skin. Secondly, with the choice of color that is made for the hair. Thirdly, with the choice of color that is made for her outfit, for what she is wearing. So all of this is done to create a very, very vibrant and beautiful contrast. So it's really well done. Cartoons or comic books for which these are styled are very, very fun to read. I don't know about the popularity all over the world, but in the United States, when I was a young girl, there were comics. We used to get little comic books and we used to read them, and we knew the characters and the stories, and they were all in little boxes, and we actually got into the lives of the characters. It was actually very fun, and I'm sorry that those are gone because the artists who drew those comics were very, very skilled. And today, they're not very popular because we have the internet and so forth. So comic books still live, but not in the same way. So this art, for those of us who remember comic books, is reminiscent of that popular activity. So now we get into something very, very different. And this is John Trumbull, and he painted a key Revolutionary War moment. So although this piece is from the past, we can see that the piece is very well done in the time frame. So not all of the pieces were cartoonish or, how can I say, reminiscent of this style, but also very realistic, or pieces of realism. So the piece that you're looking at is called The Signing of the Declaration of Independence, 1817. Make sure you go to that slide. So here you see individuals that are sitting and dressed in clothes a priori, or meaning from another time. Take a look at their suits. Right away you know that this is not present time. And this is how we see the comparison. Look at the clothing that we see here. Look at the clothing that we see here. Very, very different. The Declaration of Independence is a very important document that was signed in the United States. The purpose of that document was to declare the independence of the United States. And so on July 4th of each year in the US, there is a celebration of this independence. Now remember, it wasn't independence for everyone, because black people were slaves when this happened. So black people did not become free until 1865. And so if you look in this image, you will notice there are, even though there were many black people in the United States who have been brought over to the United States from Africa as slaves, we will not find them in any image of the Declaration of Independence. And that is because black people did not have any of the power. They were literally slaves of some of these actual men that are signing this document, which is very interesting. So we want to keep that in mind, because sometimes we look at these images and we wonder, why are there no other people of color? Why are there no women in this image? And the reason why is because there were no women signing the Declaration of Independence, because it's a very paternalistic society, patriarchal society, male-dominated society at the beginning. Women did not have the same rights as men. And so we don't see any images of women at all. So let's dissect the image, what we see in the back of the room. This has some neoclassical style. So we often think of the neoclassics when we are looking at things. It's very interesting because I traveled to Vietnam this past weekend and I stayed at a hotel. And the hotel in Vietnam, which is in Asia, was neoclassical. So it had columns and pillars and all of those things. So neoclassicism is pervasive. We find it everywhere in art. So in this piece, of course, we do find some elements of neoclassicism. If you look up at the top, you can see the little pillars and the design that is very neoclassical style. So neoclassic meaning new classics, we see that. We also see fabric done very well here. So take a look at that, don't miss that. The paint is very light in color, but we get some nice contrast, diagonal lines to create the flagpoles, and etc. We also have symmetry. Go right down the middle of this piece. Now notice I'm going to go back again to the pop art. Notice that we're not looking at symmetry. That's the other thing that's not necessary. So we don't see symmetry in this image, but we do see balance. So it is very balanced nicely, but contrast that to this style in which we see symmetry, and the symmetry is achieved with the two doors. The two doors tend to divide the painting in half. And notice that this gentleman is standing right in the center. And we also have an audience of men. Look at their postures. This gives you a sense of the time. Notice how they're sitting, how their legs are crossed. Notice their attire to give you an insight into period style, their expressions, and also the documents themselves. The documents are white. Obviously, paper is white, but they're given prominence in this image. Some of them, to make you really look at them, appear as if they're about to fall off the table. But the artist has taken great pains to make sure that we see them. And how is that accomplished? With contrast. So the table has dark hue on this side. It's actually green, but on this side, almost black was used to contrast the paper very clearly with the tablecloth, because the focal point of this piece should in fact and is in fact these papers and these individuals around the paper. So because of that, we get perspective. So the perspective is that these individuals are smaller and these individuals are larger. Even these are smaller, these men. And why? To give you a sense that they're in the background, that they're not as important. Although they're there as witnesses and observing the situation, they are not signing those important documents. And then of course we see curtains on either side, very nicely done to distinguish the hardness of the wood for the doors with the curtains and the flags, a simple technique that you all know is used, and that is the use of contour. Also, the color for the curtains is much softer than the brown wood. And let's not miss the carpeting. So with the carpeting, we have a simple rectangle, but there's another step. And the other step is that design, intricate design is added to the carpet to give us a sense of color. We also see this well-done chair, and which with the well-done chair, we can see that it's comprised of fabric. Lighter colors are used, contour lines to create the chair and to give it a sense of elegance, but also has a certain amount of regalness to it. Because if such an important document is being signed, obviously you want to have a chair that is nicely done. So overall, this seems like a simple piece, but if you take the time to analyze it formally, you will find that it has a lot of the techniques that we have learned previously. Because now you're sophisticated. Now you're not just looking at this and saying, oh, this is just a boring painting of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. That's not what it is. It's actually a very well done piece if you look at the techniques that are used. So we want to continue to do that even when we look at modern art, because modern art on the face of it can sometimes look a little simplistic, like, oh, it's just a man and a woman in a car and it's a cartoon. But when you begin to analyze it and look at the contrast and the lines and the detail and the perspective and all of those things that we've been talking about, it becomes more than just a simple piece of art. So let's take a look at this one. So this is the person who pioneered realism. So we're going to be getting into the detail around this piece, because what do I mean by the word pioneered? For many pieces of art, we have looked at the person who started the work. So in terms of realism, of which pop art, remember, is in fact realism, we look at this artist who is Winslow Homer. So make sure you know this artist, his name is Winslow Homer. This piece is called Snap the Whip, and it's done 1972. So take a look at those clothing and that attire and so forth, and compare that to this piece of realism, which we see here, and we get an immediate period style. We can see, oh, this is a different time frame altogether. Look how they're dressed. So we're gonna stop here, and in our next video, we're gonna start with a discussion of this piece entitled Snap the Whip, 1972. Thank you.